Discovery call is basically a visit, typically an in-person visit with a donor or a prospective donor. Typically, again, in person. Sometimes things are done electronically over the phone, but typically it's in person. And the purpose is to determine if the individual you're interviewing might one day consider a major gift to your organization. Basically, what we do is we ask a series of questions during a discovery call. We're trying to understand the donor. The purpose of providing information to the donor about our organization is actually secondary to getting to understand what the donor is about, learning what their values are, what their wants are, what their needs are, and their purpose. And so we're really trying to figure out what motivates them. And so that really is really the crux of the discovery call. And the reason I wrote the book is because I couldn't find any information, 25 years ago about doing a discovery call. And I said, well, we're going to write a book. And so I did. And it's one way to be successful. It's not the only way, for sure. Everybody does it their own way. But Audrey, that's basically in a nutshell what a discovery call is.
Thank you, John. That's great. And, you were just talking about questions. And I think, the art of asking questions is an art that really needs to be refined and developed. And I know early in my career, I used to go on discovery calls. And to your point, I spent a lot of time talking, but I wasn't as good about asking the questions so that the benefactor. Talk to me a little bit about those questions. Do you have like your go-to question, like your starter question, or what questions do you think our students should be considering?
Well, I think I always start with if the individual's a donor, I start there and thank them and ask them, why they decided to give, what motivated, what inspired them to make a gift, and we start there. And then we just talk about a little bit about them and their interests, and I try to get to know who they are, their profession, talk about their family, and we try to get into talk about our organization, and are we one of your top three organizations that you like? Just real basic questions, and then we get into more questions about what they're interested in, what motivates them, what drives them. It's funny when you ask some of these questions, people will look at you like, "Oh, nobody's ever asked me questions like that before. This is really cool. It's about me." So we try to do that, and you get to a point where you're doing it and you have a connection with an individual, and you will say, what's been your greatest achievement in your life? What do you still want to do? And so these are like really sort of soul searching questions, but people, when they hear them and you've got that rapport going, they're like, oh, this person's really interested in me and they really want to know, so I'm not walking in the door to ask for a gift. I'm there to get to know them. And so, but those are the questions, asking about their values, what's important to them. Is family important? How do they spend their spare time? What volunteerism do they do? What other charities are they involved in, and what do they give to? So I'm always trying to find out what their philanthropic motivation is. And if they are givers, then I want to delve into that a little bit. You can even ask questions like, what's the best gift you've been involved in? So ask them about a donor experience. So again, answers and answers and answers. And you're right about the talking, because I did a lot of that when I first started. And typically, my rule of thumb is the prospect should be talking twice as much as I am. That's a perfect discovery call. They're talking at least twice as much as I am. I'm asking questions and listening.
Yep. No, I love that. We say 70-30. The prospect should be talking 70% of the time, and we should be talking 30%. And that's from Bill Sturdivant. If you've not read The Artful Journey, Bill Sturdivant talks in his book about the 70-30. Don't be talking all the time. Let them talk. Let them talk about themselves. And I loved when it makes me happy, and it also makes me sad when a benefactor says to me, well, nobody's ever asked me that question. I think, why aren't we asking them questions like, what's really important to you, or what are you most proud of, or what do you still want to do in your life? Like, if we're not asking those kinds of questions, we're really having superficial conversations instead of really getting into, I still remember a conversation I had with a benefactor where I felt like all the walls had come down. And this very affluent, very wealthy man was no longer that person. He was just this humble soul who, when I asked him, when he reflected on his life, what did he think he wanted it to say? What did he want that to look like? And it ultimately led to an $8 million gift. But it was really, again, taking down those walls and understanding that he had a passion for helping kids get to college. He didn't grow up rich. He worked his tushy off to put himself through school, and just kind of, and you get on that trajectory, and then you're in a different space. Like you said, John, it's not about a gift. It's about a human being with a desire to do something for other people. And how do we then move forward with that? So one of my favorite ways to approach discovery calls too, and this is a little bit of cheating because I work a lot for universities. And when you're at a university or when you're at an organization where someone may have had an experience, so like a hospital, but for university, I'll say, hey, I know the St. Mary's of 2024, but I wasn't around in 1980. Can you tell me a little bit about when you were in school? Can you tell me a little bit about what was your favorite thing to do, or what did that look like? And they just blossom. They start telling you about their favorite professors. They start telling you about their favorite traditions. Why do you think that's important, John? Why do you think it's important that we kind of unpack a person and their joys and their histories and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's about agency. Certainly, when you talk about a person who's an alumnus of a university, that's a natural connection. And so we always when you reminisce. I just was back on campus at Western Michigan University, where I got my undergraduate, and I was there for homecoming. And I was a guest DJ on the radio station, which I did as a student. And talk about just the flood of memories coming back and how wonderful it was. And that's the type of experience you want to give to an alum. I will say, on the other hand, that my experience over the last 10 years or so of my career as a major gift officer, I did it for 20 years for a university. I found that donors were more and more, were less and less focused on being an alum and being more focused on the purpose of the gift and what the prospect was. And I also found personally that the friends of the university were giving at a higher level than the alumni of the university. So for those of you who are not working in higher ed, don't necessarily think that that's a negative thing, because I don't think that that's everything in all. It is an advantage for sure. And when you get people back on campus and reminiscing and having an opportunity just to talk about, what it was like. And, I mean, the students, today are like, this Greenhoe guy comes in and talks about his experiences, 30 some years ago, but I think they actually do enjoy it, and we enjoy it too. So it is fun, but having that opportunity to re-engage them is definitely one way to cultivate and get them closer to maybe at a point that they would want to make a gift to the institution. It's definitely an aid. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, John. And I want to just echo that because, for instance, that $8 million gift that I just spoke about was not from an alum. It was from a friend of the university. And in our last capital campaign, I would say 10 of the top gifts were from friends and not from alums. And so out of, $20 million gifts or 15 million plus gifts, the majority of them were from friends and not from alums. So we need to look at everybody as a potential friend to have a discovery call with. So I know you talked about discovery calls taking place in person, but how do you get that discovery call? The thing I hear from students often is, I call and I send them an email and I'm trying to get a visit with them, but I can't get a visit with them. Talk to me a little bit about how they can actually get an appointment for a discovery call. Do you have any words of wisdom or tips?
It's a long conversation, and I'll try to truncate it. The way I look at discovery is you need to be as transparent as possible. The fact that you are a fundraiser for an institution and this is what you do. You would like to talk to them about their experiences, thank them for their support. You're not there to ask them for a gift. That's not the reason that you're there. So you need to make sure that you make that very transparent when you're starting out, because people, if they see you're a fundraiser, they're going to, they might ask that question, which is fine. But I do think that it is trying to find a way to connect with them in a way that's comfortable for them. So strategies include sending an email before you pick up the phone, or sending a letter before you pick up the phone. So at least they can kind of be a little bit ready for a contact like that. And the thing that I will tell people and I tell my students, and I actually had a group of Australian fundraisers on a Zoom last month, and the question was, how many times should you contact a prospective major donor or someone you want to qualify before you move on? And so the questions were 1, 3, 5, and 7. So I'd say 30% said 3, and another 50% said 5. One person said 7. And my answer is it's 7. So and there's a reason why it's 7. There's a reason why it's 7. It's because marketing rules say that American Marketing Association says the average C-level executive says it takes 7 phone calls for them to return a call back to you. So think about it. But everybody always says, "Oh, that's too much." But it isn't. There's so many reasons why somebody wouldn't call you back, especially if they don't know you. But you're there to be sort of like a pleasant reminder, sort of like a dripping faucet. Just pleasant. You're persistent, but you're not pushy, but you're definitely persistent. You keep coming back and you keep talking to them. So that's one way to do it. And I think also taking a look at who the individual is. And as an example, if they're an alum, taking a look at what they do as a profession and they're a way to engage them for their advice that they can give to the students, because there are all ways to kind of suggest ways that they could be connected and to think about it from that perspective. So you are looking for affiliation, but at the end of the day, there's a reason why you want to discover them. You have some evidence that they could possibly be interested, and you want to explore that. And you're there not to make any assumptions. You're there simply to learn. And you will find when you do discovery calls, a lot of the people that you meet with are not good prospects. That's okay. That's the job. That's the job is to figure out who is and who is not, and making sure that you spend your time in an appropriate way. And so, in the slight tangent, but you didn't ask this question, Audrey, is that I will just tell you that my experience, 25 years in major gifts, is that the people who are good at discovery calls are the people who are successful. Mm-hmm. Discovery calls, many will tell you, are more difficult than the actual ask. Discovery is a hard part of it, and a lot of it's sales. And people will not. Oh, it's not sales. Well, I will tell you, at the beginning of the major gift process, in discovery, it's mostly sales, and then it gets into art after that. So art and sales. There's a big conversation in philanthropy, but that's sort of like the salesy end of it. And I could talk forever about that, but those are just things that come to mind when we talk about discovery and why it's important. And it's just I could talk all day on it. So.
Well, and I love that. And I think we would love that you could talk all day on it, but I know we promised our students to stay here on a time schedule. So I want to go back to the idea of those 7 calls. And one of the things that I always say is we live in a multi-channel world. And so I will try a few calls. I'll usually drop a little personal note in the mail with my business card on it. Saying something like, "Sorry, I missed you, hoping to connect with you." Then they've got a little more familiarity with me. Again, I am no one to them. I'm somebody calling from an organization. I've worked for the Red Cross. I've worked for the Cancer Society. What is the connection? How do you build that rapport to get them to pick up the phone? Because like you said, John, they don't know me. And it is the work of getting them to pick up the phone, because once we can get them on the phone and get them to believe we're not calling to ask for a gift, because we're not, and we're calling to have conversation with them. I'd just like to have a cup of coffee with you. I'd just like to learn a little bit more about you. I just, all of those kinds of things. So you're spot on. But I think if we can change it up a little with, a note, an email, a phone call, but really it takes getting on the phone.
There's a procedure, and actually I teach this when I teach discovery calls, and I'll give people like a pacing, what a sample might look like. And so it might be an email, a phone call, an email. It might be a letter or personal note. It's not all at once. And people are like, well, how over what period of time in this? And so I really get into, do it once a week. And then at the tail end, you're doing it like every couple of weeks and then you kind of figure out what you're going to do from there. The other thing we have a lot of discussions about is when you're dealing with someone in the business world, how do you deal with gatekeepers? We talk about that a lot too, and that's a whole different strategy. But you need to learn how to work with different audiences to get access to the person, and so there's a lot of that too. But it's actually a really robust topic, which I had no idea when I started really thinking about it. And I will tell you, you may not know this, but the reason I wrote the book is it was a dare by individuals in my cohort. They said you should write a book, John. Individuals who I went to St. Mary's with. So interesting. Conversations about cohorts and the power of them. And I won't go into because I have close relationships to the folks who I went with. At the university 25 years ago. But anyway, those are the types of things you think about when you start delving into these topics, and that's the cool thing about being involved in this is this is just a wonderful opportunity to learn and learn from each other, and so it's great.
I love it. I love it. So you were talking about the discovery call and the kind of figuring out what they're interested in, getting to know them, and one of the things we're having someone asking for the name of your book, and it is on the previous, or it was, I don't have the slides up anymore, but I promise we will get that in the chat. John, if you would just share the actual name of your
Sure.
book.
Yeah, it's and you can look it up on Amazon. It's just Opening the Door to Major Gifts. You'll find it. It's Opening the Door to Major Gifts, Mastering the Discovery Call. But if you type in Opening the Door to Major Gifts, pretty sure that will be the book that pops up. So
That'll get you there. Perfect. Thanks for that, John. So just going back a little bit to the discovery, and I think you know Kay Sprinkle Grace as well as I do,
sure.
and legend in our field. She has a book called Beyond Fundraising, and in her book, she talks about this work that we do, and she uses kind of an egg image, and she talks about how our work is really about it's in this area, this thing called, philanthropy is all about is values. Like we have values. Everyone has values. We were raised with the values of our family, the values of our community, the values of our cohort mates, our classmates, our roommates. We pick up values throughout our life, our faith, our religion. And so that's really philanthropy. And she says the work of development is kind of, if you will, cracking the shell. So getting through that hard shell of the egg, and then you're in that gooey, the clear stuff. When you cook it, it becomes the white of the egg. But it's gooey and it's messy and it sticks and it's not easy to get off your fingers and all that kind of stuff. But that's our work in development, and it's trying to uncover the shared values. It's trying to uncover the shared values. John, talk to us a little bit about that in the discovery call. So how do we get at uncovering those shared values? How do we get them into a conversation where we can start to move toward a conversation that might ultimately move toward a gift at a point?
I think it's about finding common areas of passion and what the donor is really motivated by. So I'll use the university example that I had, where I had an individual who I worked with. Actually, the gift took 5 years, which is way longer than gifts should take, but it took 5 years, and it was $5 million cash, by the way, not a pledge. Well, the individual was very hard to get a hold of, and she was an alum but had no history giving to us whatsoever. But we found out that she was an artist, and she was a potter, and we found a way to engage her in this program that we have at the university in pottery and ceramics. And for many years, she would tell me, she said, I really want to know what's going on at Western, but I don't think I'm going to make a gift. And she told me that multiple times, but I could just tell that she cared. I could just tell, and she kept saying me. And when the dean of the College of Fine Arts and I asked her for a gift, she said, I'm going to do this because this is my legacy. This is something that I really believe in. But it went from zero to that. And that's what a discovery call will do, is it will ask an individual, what are they really passionate about? I knew that she was passionate about art. I knew that she was passionate about, ceramics and pottery and so forth. But it was that getting past that, you're going to ask me for money, and I really don't want to give you money. And that's the whole hard, that's that shell part that you got to get past. And you just have to let them know that, you're there to provide an experience to them, something that will be fulfilling. It's something that they really will enjoy. And I'm sure you've had this opportunity too, Audrey, but it's, when you have donors who make large gifts and they thank you for the opportunity. I mean, that's what it's about. I mean, you're helping people to fulfill their legacy. You're helping people to have greater purpose in their life. And I know it sounds really flowery and so forth, but I've seen it. I've seen it so many times where people are like really excited about it. And thank you, Audrey, for providing this opportunity to me. I had no idea, and this is wonderful. And people create scholarships, and they have great relationships with their students, and they come like they're sort of like second kids and so forth. It is such a cool opportunity to engage people in that way. And you and I know this. We get to see people at their very best. We get
Yes.
to see them at their best. So as a fundraiser, that is the cool thing about what we do and what this program is about, is really getting people to understand the value of the relationship. And it isn't transactional. It should not be transactional. It's personal. It's messy. It can be very messy, but it's also it's often very difficult, but it's also extremely rewarding. Discovery calls are not easy, by the way. They're not easy. You have to do work.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I talk about them in YK, in her talking about those uncovering the shared value. It's messy. It is gooey. It can be kind of, and I have also had many a donor say, I'm not, or one of my favorite donors to our last campaign said to me, Audrey, I've done everything I'm going to do for St. Mary's. I'm not doing anymore. And I thought, okay, well, yeah, that's how I feel today. That is to me not a no. That's somebody saying to me, there's something going on. He's upset about something, or there's something he doesn't feel like he's being communicated with enough, or whatever it is. And my job in discovery is to figure out, where did the train go off the tracks? Here's a man who loves his alma mater, who's been giving for years, but who's just saying, I'm done. I'm done. And I'm like,
Yep. Yep.
I don't think you're done. I think you're done with the current situation, which is feeling like you're not included or feeling like you're not being communicated with. But I don't think you're done with St. Mary's. And of course, he went on to make a subsequent gift. I mean, he made a gift and he made a gift after that. I mean, so through the course of the campaign, he made several gifts. And this was a man who told me at the beginning of the campaign, I'm out.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. And someone is ringing my doorbell. My apologies.
So just to pony back on that, Audrey, that's the thing about talking with donors and prospective donors, is that they will push you away, and sometimes they're just testing you. They're simply just trying to put up a wall and see what you will do. But your job is to be a faithful steward. And in my class, I talk about being a fundraising Sherpa. So basically, you're providing a guidance, you're taking them along a path. You're not going anywhere where they don't want to go. You're just providing some advice, and you're leading them in certain directions, which they may or may not take. But yeah, you're listening to people, and then you're sometimes being slightly deaf, because again, the donor's telling you that they don't want to do anything. Well, you understand that there's an affiliation there, and there's a reason why they're telling you that, but you can't just hear that and just say, okay, he's not going to give. Well, there are reasons why their person's telling you that. And so if you know that they have an affiliation to the institution, then you just know that you have to pursue that. But it does take persistence, and people will tell you all kinds of things that may or may not be true. This is the nature of working with people, because people are messy. And so you just have to understand, there's some psychology, there's a behavioral analysis. We talked about this in my class, about behavioral psychology and what motivates people to give. But that's all part of that whole major gift process, and discovery is there. And you will learn things in discovery calls that you will remember months later. And they said, oh, they said this. And then you go back to it. But it's all like a big puzzle that comes together. It sounds crazy, I know, but it's actually a lot of fun. But discovery basically sets up everything. You ask the right questions, ask them the right way, you listen, and then you follow up. And the fact that they tell you something and you follow up on it, you actually do it, that will impress them. Because most people don't follow up on what they say they're going to do, or a lot of people don't follow up on what they say. They make promises and they don't do it. Well, you're going to be the person, that fundraiser, the institutional representative, who's going to be the reliable person that they can trust. And that's your job as the fundraiser.
Absolutely agree. And I really appreciate you saying that, because you do. And I always say, I've gotten into conversations with some of my peers at the university to say, hey, listen, it's my face. I am sitting with them, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, saying, we'll do this, or we're doing like, it's not that anybody doesn't want to make good on it, but sometimes when it gets messy or when it gets hard, people are kind of like, well, we're not going to do. I'm like, wait just a second. Yes, we are. We told the donor that let's we've got to honor our promises. We've got to stay true. We've got to stay the course, kind of thing. So, and ultimately, we wouldn't be doing our job here, John, if we didn't talk about. So we're driving, and so of course in the egg, the yolk is where all the nutrients are. It's the golden egg,
Right. Right.
part of the egg, and that's really where we have the opportunity to allow people to act on that value. So they've said, I'm really passionate about kids getting a college education. I'm really passionate about curing cancer. And if we're listening, if we're doing the work, I mean, when I say to people, I don't really ask for gifts anymore. They're like, yeah, sure, Audrey. And I'm like, no. Benefactors will say to me, like, I worked at a place called Courage Center, which was a place that worked with people with functional limitations, what we used to refer to as developmental disabilities or physical disabilities. And they would come and see a child who had cerebral palsy use an FES spike and begin to be able to have the use of their lower limbs. And they would be like, that's amazing. That must be expensive. What does something like that cost? And I'd say it's about $15,000. Wow, that's a lot of money. Has anyone ever bought half of an FES bike? I said,
Sure.
absolutely. I said, we have a lot of friends who come together and build, and then they see their way. And by the end, and I haven't said anything, I haven't asked for things, but by the end of the conversation about the bike and watching the child, they said, you know what, we're going to do the bike. We're going to do the whole thing. And, like, thank you, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
listened, we heard what was important to them. We let them see how our work impacts a life, and that impact piece cannot be understated. And then by seeing that trajectory, they put themselves in the story, right? We help them put themselves
Right.
in the story. And then there's an opportunity to invite them to act on that value that they've shared with us. And that's discovery work done well, right, John?
Exactly. Yeah. And it just reminds me of some of the things we've talked about in the past. And that is discovery can be difficult for people who are new at it. Um, uh, for some individuals, it can be discouraging because you do make a lot of phone calls and emails and you don't get a response. But when you learn to do discovery, the thing that you will learn is it's not personal. You're doing it because you're on behalf of the institution. And you will, if you do it for a while, you will understand that you are offering something of value. You're not going hand in hand. You're not asking for something as a subservient. You are providing an opportunity. People may decide to participate. People may not decide to participate, but you really have a responsibility to provide this opportunity for people to make a gift, to be involved, because it's the right thing to do. It's advancing the cause. Again, we think that there are individuals that will really give their life purpose to when they do it. I think these are all different things that you can remember. But that's the one thing about discovery is that people talk about, oh, it's so hard, and I get this, especially in other cultures like in the UK and Australia, and they're like, oh, that's just the Americans. They're just very bold and brash, and it's like, no, everybody can do it. And I'm telling you, anyone can do discovery calls. It takes discipline and it takes a methodology, but you don't have to have a magical gift of talking or it isn't that. 90% of it's work. It really is. And that's the thing that I always get a little bit perturbed about it. Sometimes I hear in philanthropy, it's like, oh, well, it's just all magical. It's all, no, it's not. There's a little bit of art to it. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of hard work. It really is.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And you must have been reading my mind, John, because I was going to that place of it's a discipline. And I always say to my students, because I teach the strategic giving course, and so of course we talk about this as part of the major gift process. You have to put Tuesday mornings from 9 to 11 on
Yep.
my calendar. It says
Yep.
discovery calls, because
Yep.
if you don't put it on your calendar, you're not going to do it. everything takes precedence. Somebody stops by the office and they talk, and there goes 15 minutes. And then you get a phone call from somebody else you weren't expecting. There's just all these things that happen. And my assistant knew 9 to 11 discovery calls. Don't disturb me unless it's a major benefactor who needs something, or unless the president wants me. Like everybody else, tell them I'll get back to them. And then people in the organization start to know that too. They're like, oh, 9 to 11 on Tuesday mornings, don't bug Audrey. And why did I pick Tuesday mornings? Well, Mondays aren't good, right? Everyone's back to the office, and Fridays, people are kind of already leaning into the weekend. Although sometimes I found Friday afternoons were great times to do discovery calls for those that are still in the office. But it's talk to me a little bit about the structure of making sure you're making discovery calls, so they're getting done.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you have a set goal, if you're a fundraiser and there's so many you're supposed to make. But I do think that, let's just say you are a major gift fundraiser and you have a portfolio. I mean, again, that could be for any organization, whether it's healthcare or education or whatever. But you're going to find as a newer fundraiser that, half of them are going to be discovery people, at least. So that's your work. But I do think that setting aside a certain amount of time, various times of the week, I will tell you some of the things that have worked for me. I like to call the office around 5:30. And the reason I do it is because people have been in meetings all day and they're back at their desk and they're trying to get all the work the heck off their desk so they can go home. But there's a good chance they'll be at their desk. And so you got to think about, what works, and you have to make compromises with your own personal life, because you got to figure out, when you can do things, and you got to be able to, if you're making discovery calls and trying to get people to call you back, you've got to be available to answer the phone. I mean, and so if I'm out doing something on the weekend, there really is rarely that I can't get back to somebody in 15 to 20 minutes. It's pretty rare. So, but that's the mindset. It makes it pretty cool, but also it's like, it is a job that kind of can be 24/7. You don't want it to be that, but it can be something that's much more active. But yeah, I mean, I hope that makes sense. That's just something that I think about when we do